Welcome everyone to the afternoon session. We'll do our best to alleviate the effects of lunch on our stomachs and brains. We will have a panel on AI-related challenges and regulatory responses vis-à-vis disinformation tackling. First of all, allow me to introduce our panelists. To my left sits Kristina Stump, Head of Media Convergence and Social Media Unit at European Commission. Next to her is Ivan Srba, AI researcher with particular focus on disinformation tackling at Kaplan Institute of Intelligent Technologies. And to my right sits Professor Jiří Matas, a computer vision researcher and full professor at Czech Technical University. Then there's Dominika Hajdu, a policy director at the Center for Democracy and Resilience at Globsec. Next is Jana Soukupova, a law researcher and a PhD candidate at Charles University. And next to her is Julia Schwartzova, government official and public policy manager at Google. My name is Jakub Šimko, and I'm also a researcher at Kaplan Institute of Intelligent Technologies. I had three sections for this panel, all of which are related to AI. We will start with generative AI question, and then we will move on perhaps towards data acquisition challenges and also the role of recommender systems. So I will start with the AI, and my first question will be on Jana. Under AI Act, under which category do LLMs, generative AI, and conversational AI actually fall? Because these technologies are quite versatile; they can be used for many things. So where do they fall? Like in general now, perhaps where do you think they should fall? And maybe tell us whether we should or shouldn't handle them altogether differently.
I will give you a kind of lawyer answer, and I will say it depends. Like the first thing is it depends on which version of the act they're looking at, because there was a version proposed by Commission in 2021, which did not really, count with the generative AI. And now we have another version by the Parliament who actually counts with generative AI, and that's why they modified the definition. However, if we look at the AI Act, I don't think it's about what kind of AI it is, but what you do with it. Because you have the systems that are prohibited, which is again about the usage. Then we have the system that poses a high risk. Again, it's about how you use it. And then we have the remaining category. So the thing is that the generative AI can again fall into any of these categories, depending on what you do with it. And for your question, whether it should even tackle the generative AI, I think that's right now for the political, debate and for, the lobbying behind it, because for some, they say that shouldn't fall within the act because it's not really an AI or it doesn't pose a high risk and so on. For others, it's still an AI. Right now, it's the most discussed AI, so it should be under the act. For me personally, I think that if we omitted generative AI, then we would be more and more fragmenting the regulation, because right now we have so many new acts coming from the EU, and if we just created an act for AI and did not cover generative AI, with the possibility that it maybe in the future will be in different act, in the process where we already have 20 different acts to any sort of technology, the regulation will be even more fragmented. So I think that it should be included in it. The only debate is on under which section, but again, that will depend more on the usage than on, the technique.
Thanks. Kristina, any reaction to this?
Let me focus a little bit on the topic of disinformation and generative AI, because that is really this is important for this community. And let me just first stress that it is really, how I see it, a new technique to spread and create this information even more powerfully. So on the one hand, if you think about ChatGPT-like applications to create this information more easily. But then when we speak about voice or videos or pictures, these techniques can help to illustrate this information in a way that it is more credible and more easier to capture audiences with it. So there are the risks that I see in particular regarding this technology. And there is, I think, also the answer that I think needs to be taken. And especially after lunchtime, I will not dive deeply into the legislative approaches, but indeed, I think the EU is tackling this on several levels by the AI Act, indeed still in negotiations, then some provisions in the Digital Services Act to tackle these risks, and also the Code of Practice on Disinformation, that where there are commitments how to deal with generative AI. And how to deal with generative AI in the code, I think it's a very pragmatic approach, basically to take measures to detect it, so that it is detected by the system, for example, social media companies, that this is AI-generated content, and then to label it, because as long as users know that they are dealing with content generated with generative AI, then they can face it in an informed way. So in short, I think many approaches have to be targeted towards a very powerful detection and labeling system.
Yeah. Thank you. Maybe you can react to this. How do you foresee future capabilities for detecting synthetic content, or even today's capabilities? How this will evolve?
So I think what I heard is fine, but I think I would also shift the responsibility to the generators. So there already has been some talk about provenance. So if you generate something, you must properly label it. And maybe when it comes to text, you might source it. Like, if I generate this, here are the sources which somehow you can fall back on, and that will be part of the generation. So you cannot publish anything that will not have these sources or the declaration of being generated by AI. The detection part, I think that's where maybe the companies, okay, they are very powerful companies, like, let's say, think about Google, Meta, and so on. Powerful, I mean, they have lots of resources, but it's sort of a war. So if you detect and label things, and these labels are public, as opposed to withdrawn, then it's easy to do training on these detected examples as something as negative examples, and I should make my generator, let's say, less detectable, and that would lead to some sort of a, let's say, war in terms of who spends more on training, and this is in this adversarial setting, which is well known. So perhaps rather than detect and label, withdraw, so that others cannot, because if you detect, label, and announce, then you are giving the guys who are generating the threats, you are giving them training data to make your detection harder. Yeah? It's not the same thing as detect and label and detect and remove.
Yeah, I get it. Although aren't we sort of destined to this arms race? Because one can easily picture one or several rogue models, let's say, generative models, deployed somewhere, I don't know where, in China, like providing generated content not regulated by anything.
Yeah. So let's say we talk about Twitter or we talk about Facebook, so they would commit to the fact that the first thing before it shows up and starts to spread, it will be checked, and it will not spread, it will not be allowed to show up in those systems, because if you allow it to sort of show up and later be detected, then they know, aha, my generated content was not so good, it didn't pass, it didn't fool the detectors, we have to somehow change it. So I think the companies should have the right and maybe obligation to check the content. I think there are already things like this, like with the best available means at reasonable cost before the content shows up, which is a little bit of prevention. And you don't let it show up, and that would mean that maybe the upload will not be so instantaneous. Maybe it will have to be applied to everything, or maybe you do it the first time someone likes it. Because if you do everything that's uploaded, that might be enormously expensive, because you would have to run it for every silly picture of, I don't know, Some guys who are cycling, they generate 100 photos and he will be checking all of that. So maybe once some things get traction, there will be a threshold. At that time, we apply some detection. We withdraw these things immediately and don't announce it.
Right. Thank you. Ivan, Jiří is obviously referring mostly to pictures as his domain of expertise and videos. What about generated texts? What's your take on detecting them now, maybe in the future?
Okay, so like the main difference between pictures and videos is that in the case of text, we have a very limited like expression in characters only. So while in image we can still observe some kind of artifacts that, okay, this was AI generated. In the text, and especially if we are speaking of very short text, like a social media post, it's much more difficult to identify that this was generated. Like when I proceed from our own research, fortunately, the current generation of large language models is still detectable, especially if we have like a longer piece of text, let's say 1 or 2 paragraphs of text. But like I'm quite convinced that in like very short time, maybe in 1 year or 2 years, it will happen that all these statistical properties that are still hidden in the text will not be observable anymore, because large language models will be so like perfect in generation of human-like text that it would be like much more difficult to identify that this is generated. So like this is what I suppose that will happen quite shortly, but at this moment it's still possible to detect such text.
Everything I said was on the assumption that very soon this will happen. Things will not be detectable, therefore there will be it will be very difficult to detect, and therefore the generators have some obligations like flag it, say that I used it. Because for text, I think it's obvious. For images, it's around the corner. For videos, maybe 10 years, but sooner or later we will not be able to detect. Therefore, the person who generates must say something and must declare.
But there is one issue that if we are speaking about generative AI that is under regulation, we can ask like authors to hide some watermark or something into the pictures. But like in the text, it's obviously more difficult to hide something into the text. But when we are speaking about that like open generative models that are just out there on the internet and anybody can download them, like there is no way to regulate this part of it.
You use it, you post, you made an offense, you get punished. That's like normal application of law. You used the model, you didn't declare it, you posted it. Sorry, that's like stealing an apple from your neighbor's garden. Same story.
I believe that in practice it would be quite difficult to make this system efficient, as I would not necessarily expect a pro-Kremlin disinformation actor to proactively declare that this has been generated by generative AI. And again, there is laws are very good, and that's important, and that's why the EU is also regulating it. At the same time, I think we also have to look for pragmatic solutions that can be fast and efficient, and I think that's why there is an obligation of those who are building these systems that can be used to generate these images. And indeed, this metadata inclusion may be more difficult for text than for video and for images. There it would be important. Why not impose an additional obligation on the generator? Absolutely. At the same time, as this is raised, I think it's important to make sure that all elements of the chain are addressed. And here also what I refer to, that social media companies that can be used to disseminate such content is also investing in detection and labeling. So if the link is at any moment broken, then this can be quickly addressed, because we have seen, and I hope that Dominika will go into that also, that this can be very much used in order to influence or manipulate elections, for example.
Yeah, perhaps we can continue with Dominika if it is worth it to give us an example. Please do so. regarding influence on electoral procedures.
Yeah, so also what Christina referred to, we just had the elections, as was discussed during the previous panel, and just 2 days before the elections, a deep fake appeared that was spread on Meta, on Facebook, which was taking or mimicking a voice of the leader of the second most popular party, Progressive Slovakia, allegedly speaking with a journalist from the Slovak media Deník about manipulating votes. And the problem with this deepfake is indeed that it was treated by the social media platform only as a fact-checking content that is worth fact-checking. So it was fact-checked after a few hours of being posted, and this label of that this is not true has been put on it, but if I wanted to see this deep fake, it was still I was still able to see it. So it just asked me whether I want to still see it, even if it's not true, and I could still see the deep fake, and it was still available for spreading. And at the end, it had, well, we don't know exactly how many views and how many people actually saw the deepfake, and this is one of the problems, that we actually don't know the impact of this very single piece of content, which was spread prior to the elections. But it definitely had at least 130,000 views, and in a country of 5.4 million inhabitants, that's quite a lot. The problem is that it wasn't tackled at any stage. When it comes to the blockage, of its spread, it was just really spread across the platform several times by several influencers within the bubbles, let's say.
Thank you. Maybe it's time for Julia to react on and reflect on the discussion so far, and next, tell us a little bit what was the effect of, or how did generative AI change the game for Google vis-a-vis disinformation tackling, and you can also address, if you can, the question of measurement and disclosing the impact of certain pieces of content.
Mm-hmm. Sure, thank you, and thank you for having me here. I'll try to respond relatively quickly given the time, but also if you allow me to take it just one short step back. I, of course, understand we're discussing the risk, but I do want to say that we fundamentally believe that AI has an incredible potential for positive impact on the societies, whether that's in terms of providing more useful tools or in medicine or accessing content in your own language. So there's a whole spectrum of positive things that AI and generative AI can bring to us, and I'll speak also about what that means for tackling disinformation. But of course, we are very much aware of the risks, and that's why the approach that we have adopted at Google towards generative AI is on the one hand bold, but also very much paying attention to the responsible part. And the way that we do it, especially when it comes to content responsibility or content safety, is looking at a few pillars. One of them is developing and implementing policies for our product and for content that appears on our platforms that are already tackling this issue. We already have policies against manipulated content on YouTube, and we continue to develop new policies in reaction to technological developments that we're all seeing, including, for instance, for election ads. As of this month, mid-November, we have a new election ads policy that requires prominent disclosure of any manipulated content. Of course, this is not a silver bullet, but it's an ongoing process, and we are in discussions with our partners in the public sector, with researchers, NGOs, and so on, to make sure that our policies are set well for these developments.
Then we are also very much investing into AI responsibility in terms of product features and tools that we are deploying to hopefully ensure that our users are better informed when they might be accessing content that could be manipulated or is generated by AI, be that with about this result or about this image features, which provide you with additional information. For instance, when it comes to images, on when the image may have appeared in the past, elsewhere on the internet, what may be the context, if it's used in the right context, and so on. But we are also developing new tools like a Synth ID, which is a tool for watermarking and identifying manipulated content. This is, again, early stages, but we hope that this is something that can be eventually really useful when tackling the spread of this kind of content, but also not necessarily just disinformation, but for identifying manipulated content. And then, of course, we are working with our partners, both in the public sector and with organizations across the world, including locally, on user digital literacy, because that's a big part of what I think we should be looking at when we talk about tackling disinformation generally, not only Gen AI related disinformation. And that's something that we've really invested a lot of our efforts into, especially into local cooperation. And I'm very happy to see many of our partners here, and that's something that we'll continue to look into as we go forward.
Okay, thanks. Now let's have a more positive round. You already suggested, and that was my idea as well. Any particular ideas how to use generative AI or conversational AI or LLMs? We are using these terms a little bit interchangeably here. Okay. What are your takes, distinguished panel, on this? How can we use generative AI to tackle this information better than, for example, a year ago? What are the opportunities you see?
Let me, before specializing on generative AI, look indeed into the potential of AI in general for detecting disinformation, because I mean, generative AI or pictures generated by generative AI are the new phenomenon. However, we still see also regarding current conflicts, the simple old method of using an old picture in a new context. And for example, AI can be very useful to detect this type of manipulation, that is also a type of manipulation, or, for example, to detect with the help of AI if a video has been manipulated or generated by AI, and the European Commission is here also, for example, financing several research projects to help this type of research. How can AI help to detect and expose this type of manipulation?
Thank you. Any other takes? Yeah.
I think that for a lot of pro-democracy actors, it's a really good opportunity from the strategic communications perspective, because it provides us the opportunity to generate a lot of content that is in line with our values and the democratic principles. Because up until now, we were a bit restricted when it comes to what we could create by our human powers, obviously, right? And the other side, meaning mostly Russia and China, were utilizing bots and trolls to spread their content. And we, because we have some ethics and principles, we're refraining from utilizing that. But I think that generative AI gives us the potential to really create content that, including videos, images, and text, that finally will have the opportunity to match the amount of content the adversaries are producing to target the audiences. And moreover, it gives us the opportunity to tailor it to their language. I hope that, I'm not sure whether any PR or communications experts are here, and I'm not trying to take their jobs and replace it with the AI, but it really gives us a great opportunity, especially to NGOs which don't have a lot of resources for communications agencies to produce a lot of high quality content and targeted to their specific audiences and also in other languages. So for example, when it comes to the EU, right, EU is often creating campaigns towards all 27 countries. And what it usually does is it just has one campaign with translated content into just local languages, which often doesn't appeal to people because every country is different with every culture, with every specific political, social aspect. And this gives us an opportunity with generative AI to create better tailor-made campaigns to promote our values.
Great. That sounds like an idea. Write it down, Ivan. we will do a tool on that at some point. Any other? Yeah.
Add one additional thing. For us, in terms of tackling this information, especially when it comes to LLMs, just the pure power of this technology allows us to train our models much faster. Now it's in terms of days rather than weeks or months. And that helps, for instance, when detecting specific or new types of violations of our policies. When we look back at the COVID-19 pandemic, there were emerging new narratives, and we were implementing new policies in response to various narratives, like, for instance, related to 5G networks. And what we could look at today is training our models to detect those narratives or those specific new violations much faster, which means a much faster response time, and in the end, safer online environment for our users. So in terms of the speed of action, that's a big game changer.
Perhaps you are referring to knowledge distillation techniques or generating like data sets for training lesson models. Okay. Okay. Great, because this is, I'm glad that this is like put into practice, because this is probably one of the trends we at least foresee for this domain, having us like use the large language models to generate data sets which we actually can control, look at them, check their quality, and then use these data to create lesser, more specialized models. In connection to this particular technique, I have a question on Jana, because oftentimes we are like blocked from certain research activities due to privacy issues, using content that is not anonymized or may contain sensitive information. When you are scraping web or scraping social media, you oftentimes like capture also this content, and using perhaps LLM to generate synthetic data may like help us to circumvent this. So what is your overall take on? First of all, I would like to like hear an opinion on using like data scraped right away from web or social media in training models, and how would you like see like a different technique? Maybe if we provide LLMs with some examples, also containing like sensitive information, and use them to sort of anonymize it, rephrase it, etc.
Well, when it comes to data scraping or web scraping, there is many layers of law that apply. It's not just about data protection, but it can be also about copyright, because in the end, if you scrape something from the internet, you never know how it is protected. If you scrape a photography, copyright applies. If you scrape personal information, data protection applies. So for you just scraping something and then making it online available, yes, you may actually right now break quite a lot of laws. So that's why you have to be vigilant about what you do with it. And as for how well the generative AI can help with like synthetic data or the data access, to be honest, here I am a bit of skeptic if in the future, when we have more access to data, if some companies will not misuse it and say we will not provide the data because it may tackle personal data. Because as of now, it's really hard to make something truly anonymous. the data protection framework is quite overreaching, and in the end, the business takes everything as personal data. And if the business said something is anonymized, quite often it happens that the data protection authority says, no, it wasn't. It was actually personal data, and you did not have a legal basis for processing or something. There was recently a case at the General Court of the EU which tried to come up with a bit of a different approach. However, there's already an appeal to the Court of Justice, and it was the case when the data, was handed to Deloitte, and the entity that was handing it over thought it was anonymized because it was already sorted out, and then the European supervisory authority came and said, no, it wasn't, and the General Court said, well, you have to really look deep into whether it was anonymized or not. And now we are in a situation where a lot of businesses treat everything as personal data simply because that's what the GDPR wants. So I'm afraid that in the future, when we will have maybe better access to data, maybe because of the Data Service Act, what may happen is that the online platforms will still say, no, we cannot give you the data because it's personal data, so we are not sure if we have the legal basis for it.
That's perfect connection to my next question on Christina. Do you foresee the DSA, also other legislation or self-regulatory measures to help researchers and practitioners to reach more data?
Indeed, so you already mentioned the Digital Services Act is actually imposing an unprecedented transparency obligation on very large online platforms, notably to give access to data for researchers, also recognizing the important work that researchers are doing, basically, to contribute, to have more insight, and to fight better disinformation and other systemic risks. So indeed, I am convinced that the Digital Services Act is a game changer. Again, after lunch, I will not go into the specificities and legal finalities, but Digital Services Act caters for both, like data that is not personalized, and also then the other type of data access, the data access for related researchers. And here, let me just stress the important work that EDMO is already doing in order to overcome the obstacles related to the data protection GDPR. Notably, EDMO has already published a draft code of conduct on under 40 GDPR to give access, and is now working to make this framework a reality. So indeed, here I also encourage and look forward to this work moving forward so that this can be also put in practice.
Thanks. Yuri, and maybe then Ivan,
I would like to comment on it.
Okay.
Like the first thing was like your answer, which I agree with partially, is like, okay, probably these large ChatGPT-like models scraped all the internet, and they are sort of like cleaning the data for us. So the generated thing is actually all these violations of copyright and data privacy and everything is screened. And when we use ChatGPT or whatever Mid-Journey, we are sort of saying we are clean, but the dirty thing has happened before.
let's call it content laundering.
Yeah. So okay. So that's like not a good use, and also I wanted to comment on Christina that one thing is they maybe research, but now in some sense it's about companies as well. So it could happen that because of GDPR and maybe its strict application, we will not have a self-driving car, unlike the Chinese. And to me, the worst case scenario in AI is that this, let's say, autocratic regimes or dictatorships are more powerful than us because of GDPR, and therefore the protection of people has to somehow be balanced a little bit against some possible long-term disadvantage of European industry. And these days, research and application is so near, both in time and space, that if you can do something as a researcher and then you cannot transfer it to the company that will make a product, I think this is bad for Europe. And one should be applying this GDPR reasonably. So probably nobody knows what is a personal data, because if you can connect it to identity, it is, and this is not It's not clear what can be connected to identity because there could be some funny thing in the data that allows you to extract this. But the companies should be sort of encouraged to be reasonable, because otherwise, like allowing researchers to do everything and companies to do nothing is not good for Europe. And I mean, with the data.
I believe that these aspects are very much taken into account, both when it comes to the GDPR and while the law has to be obviously implemented. At the same time, this should not be used as a pretext, not giving that access. So that is certainly an important aspect. And again, here the work of EDMO can be very useful. At the same time, also when it comes to the AI Act that is in the making, it is in particular about finding the right approach, not to stifle innovation, but at the same time also provide the right way to address the risks that are present in this technology. So indeed, these both aspects have to be absolutely catered for.
Thanks. Ivan, I have a specific question on you. How would you picture, maybe in an ideal world, or maybe in a realistic world, access of a research, from a researcher perspective, access to platform data? What are the biggest challenges you are facing right now?
Okay, so I just want to confirm that I have very big expectations of DSA and method researchers and EDMO work, and I hope that like this all implementation will become a reality in a short time, because literally every day the access to data is getting worse and worse. Like X, former Twitter, is like amazing example. I think like best, like most available data source is now like less available source. And regarding the challenges, for example, nowadays we observe how Meta is approaching the data access. So they introduce a new academic data access program, let's say, and they are opening so-called clean rooms, or like some kind of sandboxes, where you can apply for access, and from these like virtual machines or virtual servers, you can approach their data. But like there are many issues that this is a very nice solution, maybe for social science research, but for computer science and like what we are doing, like investigating this information, it's like we don't have a practical experience, but from the documentation itself, we can say that it's completely useless. Basically, these clean rooms don't allow to take away any data from them, don't allow to like take away any models that we can train there. Like what we can take out there are basically numbers, so you can calculate how many % of people share something, like charts and like this very basic information. But this is something that doesn't fit into the needs of computer science research or an AI research. So like, I hope that this will not be like a solution that will be at the end provided as a response to DSA. And what can be like ideal access is that we want really to have direct access to those data. I acknowledge that there is a GDPR and all this kind of stuff, but as you said, like if the response from social media platforms will be that we cannot give you anything because of GDPR, like we will do nothing about that, and that's an issue. So like the ideal state will be that we can directly search for those data. I am perfectly fine to sign some kind of contract and promise that I will not share it with any third parties, but have that particular access as we were used to, for example, with Twitter in the past.
Let me just stress that indeed this type of insight of what kind of practical difficulties researchers are encountering when it comes to API access. I think nobody is better equipped than the EDMO network to, for example, assemble the experiences of researchers at EU level and to provide insight what are the difficulties that you are encountering in practice with API access, with other type of access, because this can be very useful also for our work.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Now, I would like to raise a particular issue, and we will have some voting in this room. Because so far we've been discussing generative AI mostly, and we all see like potential threats related to that, chiefly being generating new, maybe personalized even disinformation content. But I would like to ask the panel whether you see this as a, or how big of a threat you perceive this particular generative AI threat versus another threat that is already like manifested, and that's the behavior of recommendation systems, AI powered in social media and elsewhere, that are already spreading this information and are basically undermining our democracies. So which of these threats do you weight as more severe? And I completely understand my question is suggestive. Ivan?
Okay, so now today I would answer that the recommendation systems in 1 year or 2 years it will be probably like at the same level. We will see.
Christina?
You will understand that it would not be appropriate from the Commission side to set up a hierarchy, because that means we should put more efforts into addressing one than the other. Let me just stress, as you know, that the Commission is looking into both aspects through the Digital Services Act. And
yeah, thank you. Iri?
Opinion, I don't use either. I have zero presence on social media, so I would be like a blind amateur to say anything.
We will use the wisdom of the crowd, you know.
Okay, but if someone in the crowd is not wise, he should shut up.
Okay, just ask electorate. Yeah.
Well, to me, the most dangerous is the use of generated AI by the recommendation systems. Right? I mean, that's a hell, and we cannot get there without proper regulation of both.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to say the exact same thing. I think the both issues kind of complement each other.
Okay.
Well, I don't think you will like my answer very much, but it goes back to what I said at the beginning. I think for both of these, the benefits can be huge and the risks also need to be recognized, but inherently, I don't think either of them is negative as such. It's about the use, how they are used and by whom they are used. So I think that's just, it's not a yes or no or a black and white answer, but it's certainly something that, as we all know, all stakeholders are looking into, and rightly so.
Right. Thank you. I would like to also have an audience vote. Who would vote for the generative AI as a larger threat? Who would vote for, okay, that's one vote. Who would vote for the recommender systems? That's 5 more votes. Okay. I like the skepticism about the question and inconclusiveness. We really do need additional research. That's why we also need auditing studies.
I mean, let me stress, it's not abstention from my part. It's rather to stress that we have to address the risks related to both. And this doesn't mean to prohibit, it doesn't mean to stifle innovation, but look into the risk. And that is, for example, also the Digital Services Act. It is taking this risk-based approach in the similar way the AI Act. So we should use these technologies, but address the risks.
Right. Are there any questions from the audience to this panel?
A beer to anyone who asked a question. So the Finns are reluctant to speak under any circumstances. There are even jokes about this, which I can tell you at the coffee break. Oh, okay. So you have a beer. I agree. I will buy you a beer.
Okay, thank you. Actually I hate questions that I have to judge one or other thing, but it's good to know. But what do you think about personalization? Because actually it's not, for me, it's not much about recommendation as such, but it's like adaptiveness of the systems, and Gen AI can help. And what do you think about this, and how this can be regulated as well? Because if someone tells that this is just technology and it can be used for good and for bad, yes, but if something is inherently in the AI system, then how it can be really regulated? Because we are people and we will not change. So what do you think about this aspect, personalization?
Who wants to start?
I maybe start like a little bit more positive because we are quite negative today. Is that like when we are speaking about personalization, we usually really think about recommender systems that are like present everywhere in social media networks. But also generative AI has like amazing potential for personalization. Large language models, for example, are amazing in paraphrasing things, like summarizing things. So like one of the biggest issues for like people nowadays is that they are information overloaded on social media. So I see like a great potential to large language models to summarize what is going about. You know, you read a lot of news somewhere, and I can ask a generative, okay, please, I don't understand it. Like, let's try to explain it to me. So, and I can say, okay, I know, like 15 years old child or something like that. Please explain it in my language. So I see a great potential here. Of course, at the same time, we need to be sure that generative AI will not generate disinformation, that the content will be actually truthful. But as soon as we will like accomplish that level of generative AI that like the content will be really true at the end, like there is a great potential for personalization in this way.
Thanks. How do we regulate personalization?
Look, personalization is a very broad topic, so I think we could spend here days to discuss that. Let me just really point to particular risks that I think we need to think about. For example, personalization when it comes to elections. Again, already in the code, we have a chapter on political advertising, and there, for example, companies who use political advertising on their services limit the personalization of political advertising so that you cannot really go into the granularity. Mm-hmm. If you are a single mom in this district, what type of measures you could be interested in from the political level. So I think that is a particularly risky area. And there I think indeed, if you apply personalization of political advertising tied to generative AI, the risks are even higher. So indeed I think there is no quick answer to this, but it has to be addressed through several layers and look into really the risky applications.
I think Vid has a question.
Hello, Vid Benes, MUP. I have a probably more general question, whether it's even possible to regulate AI, because we still did not discuss the elephant in the room, and that's the fact that the AI is a black box for us. So even if we design a perfect regulation, we cannot control completely the AI itself. So my provocative question is, maybe it's even like fruitless to try to regulate the AI. Should probably live with the fact that the AI is a black box for us. Maybe a better approach would be to focus on flagging, like that the AI should declare that it is generating something, and then simply learn people, like real people, not the artificial ones, to treat any AI contents with a very, 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 very healthy dose of skepticism. And actually many people already are treating AI-generated recommendations with a very, very healthy deal of skepticism. For example, whenever we abstain from social media, we are doing that because we have already learned that that the recommendation mechanisms can be biased, cannot be fully regulated, etc., etc. So maybe so my provocative question, whether it's even possible to regulate a black box like AI, and the second approach would be, try to learn like living people to deal with AI much more skeptically.
I can say a couple of things. So I think when we talked about this, the word manipulation was in my head. So if you have a personalized ad, it's very close to manipulation. I can ask generative AI, produce a short clip which will make this person vote for that party. And they will know that you like football and Orban pays a lot for football, so it will be a short advert about what Orban has done for football. And for someone else, he cares about migrants. So for them, it will show a large fence, and it's almost manipulative. So I think that it's very dangerous and has to be regulated. I don't understand that thing. Like, look, I guess that for you, a modern car is a black box, and you regulate its use so that people drive safely. So you regulate the use. Okay, and you don't care where it came from. Okay, nobody knows which images it saw, how it was trained, or nobody knows. It's very complicated, but you can regulate it. Now, by the way, use the word flagging just to be on the same side. To me, declaring that it's generated, it's not flagging. To me, flagging is third party detects something is wrong here. Yeah? So I could imagine that the regulation would be that anything which was touched by artificial intelligence will have a big thing in the corner, generated content, or users. I don't understand. Also, I see why companies are worried. You are sort of like you are here briefed. Okay, be positive, be positive, be positive. Okay, and we all see the benefits and fine. And we are now worried about the negative side. Fine, you could do your part, and you are doing your part, but I don't understand why we don't go after those who upload these things. Of course, you can say, well, okay, if you uploaded something and nobody looked at it, fine. But if 10,000 people looked at it and it turns out to be manipulative, incorrect, and deceitful, then you might pay $1 per each view. And you will have a couple of cases and people will become more careful. Like, I don't understand this even now. Like, I think even in this country, like until Ukraine, the Russian trolls were doing whatever they wanted and nobody cared. Like, these guys are doing damage and we say, well, let them do damage. And we are saying, so what? So there are people behind this, and I think you have to have the tools, you have to ask the generators to do their part, the companies to do their part, the people who upload to be careful, that might not be for free, doing this damage and being naughty. And then the people who spread it you might be saying, okay, look, by spreading, if you say share, and you are not sure, maybe even that is not okay. Yeah, you heard a rumor, and the rumor is actually a slander, and you spread it around. Maybe that's not fine as well. So I don't like this. These big bad companies, they have a lot of money, let them do the job. And those guys who upload, no problem. Those who share, no problem. Those who consume, okay, they are the victims, but they should also check. And so everything should be addressed in the whole chain.
Say that it's not like that you can really do anything and not be punished. Of course, it's complicated to often get to the person because in the internet everybody can be anonymous. Second thing is that not everything that is disinformation is illegal. Like, it's not illegal to lie, that's just a fact. And quite often if you spread something that may be a lie, there is still like the freedom of speech that needs to be tackled. And the other side is that it is said that if you lie and you spread disinformation, you will be punished, then it would be against the freedom of the speech, especially in nowadays when you can sometimes share something and think it's true, you can really think it. And then like the next month, it turns out that even the most prestigious media was actually wrong because it came from a bad source. That's the first thing. And second thing is that I think that now we are actually seeing court trials with people who spread disinformation during COVID and from the beginning of the war in Ukraine. I'm not saying that, first thing, not everything reaches such a seriousity that the criminal law tackles it. But in the cases when it happens, the people really go to court. I think just in the past 6 months, I read about like 3 or 4 people actually getting criminal sentences. And I've read about police receiving dozens and dozens of notices of this content, and they are looking into it. And of course, not everything from that gets to the police, yes, it's criminal, but sometimes it can be a misdemeanor, or sometimes maybe it's just simply only a lie and but not something criminal. So I would not say that automatically you can just post something and not face consequences, because quite often you do.
Indeed, I think this is important to note and not to forget when we are speaking about addressing disinformation. It's very much true, even if often or sometimes disinformation and hate speech or illegal speech is mixed. Very often this is not the case. So that's why it is important to really keep the freedom of speech in mind and not venture into areas that could go against the freedom of speech. And I think we have many instruments at our disposal to do so. The Code of Practice on Disinformation has basically 44 commitments on how to look into these. And when it comes to indeed regulating AI, we need to regulate AI in order to address the risks again. And this is to a huge part to creating transparency. And transparency, if AI is used, how it is used, and so on. Again, in some cases, indeed, prohibiting the use, for example, like social scoring in China, yes. At the same time, I think transparency can be a very powerful tool when it comes to AI systems.
Okay. Sometimes if I look at the people who share the disinformation, I really don't think they have the mental capacity to even understand it's a disinformation. And that's a problem, because to be really like liable for something, you need an intent. But so many of these people, they just put share and they truly believe it. And that's a problem. And it comes back to education and media literacy. But just look at it.
Driving license. Yeah? Not everybody can drive a car. You might have the right to share something if you show competence. We have done this in the past. People were killing people. Like 50 times more people died in Italy than 40 years ago on roads before safety belts and so on. So you have a competence test, and only if you pass this competence you are allowed to do something. And it's maybe we will get there. You will be allowed to share if you are competent enough. Like this is so dangerous for the society. I'm not sure whether I feel the society, like there's no consensus on anything almost. We can argue about completely stupid things which are obviously wrong. Lots of people believe they are right. And this is because people who don't have the competence to make any, as you say, to distinguish between anything, they share. So maybe that's like drivers who drive like mad and kill people.
To be honest, I would not like to live in a society where I need some competency test to share something on social media. That sounds to me more like North Korea than Europe.
Well, there's a balance. There's a balance.
Let me take a positive spin, because I think you mentioned media literacy, which I think is very important. And let me also, especially in this community, to stress the importance of fact-checking, because actually the latest reports under the code show, for example, that if users are seeing fact-checking labels and proven as false, they are much less inclined to share this content or to even consult this content. So I think in order to indeed observe the freedom of speech, that is a very important European value, we have to look into these instruments, and this community has a lot of good work and contribution to do this.
And on this positive note, I would like to conclude this session. Although I really hate to like break this very nice discussion, it started to heat up a little. I also wanted to contribute, but let's have that. Yeah. I don't mind if we still have time, but I believe we don't. But go ahead.
I'm honestly fine. I will be on the next panel, so I will just open it. We can argue about it in the next panel, I guess.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, should I ask it?
Yeah, and
okay,
then no answers are right.
Okay, good. And then I can open it. That's amazing. Okay, so hello. My question would be slightly connected once again to generative AI. I think that this was one of the best discussions about it I've heard, because usually they are just arguing about stuff. But my problem was, even though we kind of discussed very well the images and videos, my problem was with actually the text and the detection of text. Because I'm in sort of a unique position where I'm part of like the largest study on detecting text conducted by University of Pennsylvania. So essentially unlimited funds to it. And the point is, even now we can't detect the generated text. Even with the best technologies we can use, we cannot detect it, especially if we put it in adversarial setting. So if we are clever about how we generate this text, you are not able to detect it with sort of the desired degree of certainty. And so to me, it seems, I know that EU has to do something, but to me, it seems slightly hypocritical to want the companies, Meta, Google, etc., to detect the generated text on their platforms when the research and the data shows that this is simply a task that is not currently possible.
Do we allow yourself,
Okay. I really want to answer,
okay,
but
go
I
ahead. Go, do it.
Maybe we can discuss during the like offline or during the coffee break. Yeah, because we did some like benchmarking of different detectors and language models that generated text. And as I said, when you have like a quite long piece of text, it's still possible. I'm not saying that you can do this like with very, very, very high precision, but you can do this. But I am 100% sure that it's possible, or it's somehow possible nowadays, but in like half a year or 1 year, it wouldn't be possible. So like, we can talk a little bit more about it. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for a fruitful discussion.
Thank you.